Namaskar Vamadeva ji. You have spoken of the need for an intellectual Kshatriya. How did that idea arise for you and what does it mean?
Yes, that is a very important topic today, and it has always been a very important topic. So let's look at it in some detail. In my studies of Vedas, I noticed there was always this emphasis on the two factors, what is called Brahma, or the spiritual knowledge, and Kshatra, which is the worldly power, but it also means the rule of dharma. Dharma is not only outer, it is also inner. It is not only inner, it is also outer. Both aspects of dharma are necessary. So I've understood the importance of the Kshatriya dharma, or the way of bringing dharmic values into the world, as well as the Brahma dharma, or the spiritual knowledge of sadhana. And I discovered that mainly originally through the work of Sri Aurobindo, who was a great freedom fighter as well as a great yogi. And there's a verse in the Yajurveda that speaks about the need of Brahma and Kshatriya to always go together. And then it became clear to me that in the modern world, these two haven't gone together. The spiritual knowledge doesn't have the worldly power and all of that. So some 20 years ago, I was on a lecture tour to the temples of UK. I had about 15 talks to do in 20 days in various places. And as a speaker, I like to be extemporaneous, so I like to invent new ideas. So somehow this idea came to me, and I forgot about it. Somehow my teacher and colleague Sitaram Goel heard of the idea and said, you should say more about that. And so I began to work out that idea. And what the intellectual Kshatriya idea is about is bringing both the spiritual knowledge and also the dharmic values into the modern age. Speech has always been said to be the force, the weapon, or the power of the higher truth. Today we live in this information technology era. And it is not just a question of information, it's often a question of misinformation. There is an information war going on out there. There is a media battle going on out there. And often people who present the ideas first gain the foothold as if they are correct when they're merely the quickest to express themselves. And what we have found in recent times is that the Hindu Dharma has been the most maligned and misrepresented and distorted of all the religious and spiritual teachings in the world. This has been going on for centuries. The attacks of the foreign religions, the missionaries, the colonial rule that went on, the undermining of the traditional educational system, the effort to discredit the traditional religion to bring about more conversion. But the same type of difficulties have continued in the modern era. For example, the Marxist mind has also seen Hinduism as the enemy. So from the left, there's also been a leftist, communist, sometimes even often apparently liberal attack on the Hinduism, as well as from the older religious and Eurocentric forces, even some people of a certain scientific or atheistic mindset, and people born or educated or trained in the Western education are usually taught to look down upon the Hindu Dharma. So whenever the media highlights Hindus as backward, Hindus as casteist, oppression of women, superstition, idolatry, uncleanliness, you name it, these tend to get turned into stereotypes and highlighted, and then Hindu society is put under that shadow and that particular label. So Hindus also need to cultivate a voice in this information era and in these media roles. That is the role of the intellectual Kshatriya. When India was invaded, the Indian armies lost mainly because they didn't have the contemporary military technology. When the Hindus learned that, particularly the Marathas, they could also engage and fight equally or defeat any army that came into the country. So the same is true in the media realm. Unless we have the tools and the weapons of the era, then we cannot compete, we cannot fight, and our points of view are distorted. And because of the educational system, we may even lose the loyalty or the understanding of our own children or the people within our own culture, because they are then educated on what is essentially anti-Hindu propaganda, but because there is no challenging to it, and it comes from an educational source, there's a tendency for people to think that it is true. So in India and throughout the world, this intellectual Kshatriya is necessary, defending Dharma, defending Hinduism, Sanatana Dharma, and all related causes. So a number of people are taking up this issue of the intellectual Kshatriya. When I wrote about this 20 years ago, the internet was still a relatively minor player. The media was there, and books and magazines were very important. So I did a whole series of books. This article came from a book called Awaken Bharata. It was also brought out in a number of contexts. But now we have a more active intellectual and information war through the media, and particularly through the social media. And the social media has given Hindus an important voice that they did not have, and still usually do not have in the mass media, extending to the television and even a lot of the print media of India itself. There is still a very built-in anti-Hindu bias, not only through the, as we say, missionaries and colonial and Eurocentric views, but from the Marxist, even the Nehruvian socialist, and a number of other groups, so that even though India is a Hindu majority country, a fair appraisal or a fair examination of Hindu Dharma is very hard to find. And anti-Hindu propaganda is still very common in the media and channels today. So in that context, the intellectual Kshatriya is someone who is very much needed, the most important role, and the intellectual Kshatriya has to be trained in the tools of the era. We need to know how to use the internet, the social media, the Facebook, the Twitter. We need to know how to write. We need to know how to do audios, videos, and deal with the situation we have today. Because the force of truth and spiritual knowledge is with this greater Vedic Hindu Sanatana Dharma. If it is presented with a voice of clarity, reason, and determination, this point of view will be heard, but it must be brought out forcefully, and it must be brought out in a way that challenges the existing stereotypes, but at the same time shows a greater, broader view of the teachings, the universal, eternal tradition, the necessity of spiritual practice at an individual level, the necessity for Dharma as a way of life, harmony within society, harmony with nature, organic connection of the whole of life, and protecting and spreading the greater Rishi and Yogi vision. Because what humanity needs is not just simply science, technology, and information, but greater awareness, intelligence, and insight, such as requires sadhana, meditation, and deeper study, study of the whole of life, study of all aspects of life, outwardly, the social realm, inwardly, the spiritual realm, according to these deeper principles of Dharma, self-realization, and a carrying of deeper values to the whole of humanity. So the purpose of the intellectual Kshatriya is not simply to defend India or to defend Hindus, but to again spread this greater cause of Dharma, consciousness, natural living, understanding the universe of consciousness for all humanity, and particularly to help India awaken to its spiritual role, which is to share its greater dharmic traditions with all of humanity. As Sri Aurobindo said, India's role as going to be the great guru of humanity. But for that to occur, there must be an awakening of that knowledge and tradition within the country, and it is the purpose of the Intellectual Kshatriya to do that. So it is my hope that people of all ages, but particularly the youth, take up this role of the Intellectual Kshatriya, learn all the tools and gain all the equipment necessary today, but have the insight, the inspiration, and the conviction to bring these teachings out in their broadest form, because they have the greatest power of transformation for society and for the individual as well. Namaste.